Thanks for blasting it all over the place.
Oh, no worries.
Now we're live on YouTube. Facebook should be live now. Breaking news. I don't think it's breaking news. I gotta change that.
Reflective commentary more than breaking news, yeah.
Where is that preset? It's different on the phone, but anyways. No? Oh, no. That's not the preset I'm looking for. Anyways, oh, there we go. Now live on Instagram. There we go. All right. Fun. Okay, now we can begin. Thanks for joining, Mark. I guess we'll do a little introduction of you, of what I found online. Let's see if what I have.
It might not be true. I do a thing with my students where I have AI write my bio, and it's every sentence is both right and wrong, and I let them know that that's the kind of cautionary tale of using it for research, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes.
Found the breaking news part. All right. Oh, and now I can upload. There's my logo. Oh, jeez. Anyways, I'll do that for next one. All right. So let's see. So Mark, I know you from, what is it, 8 years ago now is when you ran for Ward 2.
Yep.
So that's kind of when I started following you. But I also knew you from before with you ran for NDP. For Brant, right?
I ran federally for Brantford, Brant, Six Nations, and
federally. Yeah. And you are, well, according to this, let's see if AI is right, that you're a professor at Mohawk College of Community. Studies?
No, see, that's where it gets sort of
AI
isn't always your best friend.
There we go.
So I mostly teach in programs like concurrent disorders, which is mental health and addictions, police foundations, protection, security, investigation, community justice services, social service work, sometimes paralegal, and wherever else they need me, depending on. I'm lucky I can teach in a lot of different programs, so it's I have a lot of different student groups that I get to touch base with. And a mentor of mine, a guy named Marshall Gans, used to say that one of the things he loves about teaching is you have a conversation every week with the future. And I really feel that way. And it's interesting to see what they're seeing and also what they don't get to see, like how things have changed. So.
Yeah. Well, definitely, that's definitely a subject that is really, I would say, busy right now. Especially the social side. Well, kind of still recovering from the pandemic, I'm guessing.
We're getting a little out of that. It's there's always going to be some hang-on effect from anything that big. Think about like when I teach about the history of social service work, we talk a lot about the Great Depression and how you might have had a grandma that still reused tinfoil and those butter cups and things like that, those butter containers, and that's 40 years after. The Great Depression, they were still doing that. So there's always going to be some things like look at the way we're having this chat and not having to do it in a studio, right? But
exactly.
A lot we've kind of moved past, and I think we're back to. It feels more like it did before the pandemic than ever before.
Yeah, I guess that's good. All right. So I guess we'll go back to, the topic of the election this year. 8 years ago, if you can remember that far. I know it's a little blurry for me for some of these things, but I remember you had you were the first one that was the more social that I can remember. Because when I started this 3 elections, the one before that, I did a YouTube and I tried to get all the Ward 1 people together to do a Facebook Live, kind of like this again. I'm trying to come back to that, and it was John Wheat going, "What is this in for you?" I'm like, I would like to learn information. So it's 2026 now. I still like to learn information. So starting off with your experience with Ward 2, like it's totally different than when you ran 8 years ago too. Like there's probably some more houses that you that you'd have to go door to door with. and that. So trying to think of where's that my thing. So if you're looking back, what was the? I think I've also read with Lucas and them. It's like the learning curve, like just like any new job. What was that like when you won?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I think because I had that federal experience, and I had a lot of organizational experience, right? And as a social worker, in the past, you do a lot of work with different levels of government. When I was a teenager, I worked with Brantford City Hall. I went to City Hall and helped advocate for changes to the bus system, right? And I had friends who were city councilors, so I felt like I personally. I want to be careful how I say this. In some ways, I was able to hit the ground running, I felt. But in other ways, there's a lot of technical things. There's a lot of workload. There's every counselor I've ever met has had a really difficult first year, right?
Yeah.
And you got to remember too that Steve and I, Steve Howes, who was my ward mate and still an excellent counselor, he and I were both starting new. So we didn't have one of us who had experience in the seat, right? He had a lot of business experience. I had a little business experience, but I had a lot of community experience and a lot of political experience. But we were really lucky that a couple of folks like David Miller was really helpful for me, and I know John Pierce was another. But there were a lot of new counselors, and we're looking at the same thing whether you're looking in Brant or Brantford, where there's guaranteed to be a bunch of new counselors, and there is a learning curve. That first year is really hard. I would just say like any job, except your constituent base is so huge. But like any job, it takes you like 4 hours or sometimes 10 or 20 hours to do a thing the first time. And then by year 2 or 3, you can do that thing sometimes in 20 minutes because a lot of the concerns are similar, right? A lot of the concerns are, or who to talk to now. But when you're first starting, oh, somebody's at my doorbell. When you're first starting, it can take you a long time. And neither Steve nor I had somebody in the ward to go, hey, this person from 22 whatever street called, and oh yeah, they've called before. This is what they're looking for. Like, this is how you help them. So everything took way longer than it needed to until it didn't, right?
Yeah.
And then you start to develop some of those efficiencies, but it does wear you down. That first year, Jan Vanderstelt is a good friend of mine. And I remember his first year on council and having a chat with him, like, are you okay? And he said, you'll see one day. And I did, right? I did see. Some people think you need multiple terms. I don't. It just depends. I think I was able to hit the ground running pretty well to get a lot of what I wanted done that could get done. And COVID made some of that not possible, but I'd say 80-90% of, I actually had a platform and 80-90% of it I got done. And the stuff I didn't get done is stuff that I couldn't because of the timing with COVID. Like I wanted Brant to be part of villages, right? And that's not something that you can do when villages are shut down, right? And it's imposing when they're just starting up again and you're leaving. But otherwise, I had a really good experience, but there is a learning curve and it's going to be different for everybody. And people bring in different backgrounds. So if you're somebody who has business experience, well, that's a certain set of skills. But if you're somebody who has social experience or social work experience, that's a different set of skills. If you're somebody who's a farmer, that's a different set of skills. They're all valuable. That's the thing. They're all valuable. Yeah. We have a mayor who is a funeral home director and a designer, but also had a ton of community experience. We had Steve, who built playgrounds, but also had a ton of development experience. We had the farmers around the table. There were a few of them, and they have experience around agriculture and the land. Ella Haley's, I think, kicking butt when it comes to that. Now that she's on council, and so having that, I think everybody comes at it, and they're going to hit different parts of it differently. For me, something like the social service committee, that was stuff I knew off the back of my hand, and I knew it from also working in Brantford Brand as a social worker, and I knew it from my education. For somebody else, maybe their time on the chamber would be a little easier for some of that advocacy. For other people, maybe they have experience in healthcare, and that's more where they really, or policing, and they can hit some different things. But yeah, that first year for any new counselor, and I know there's a lot that are coming in, it's hard. It's really hard. No matter how much experience you have in other fields.
Nice. That's. I heard that from another email I have, and I think I'll try to figure out how we should do this talk. If I should have all the wards together, but some of these wards are getting a little too big that I may not be able to fit everybody on the screen. with the candidates. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, we have 1 week left. Officially, less than 1 week now. So it should be interesting. The other question I had is, yeah. So I know when you were in office, Paris was growing at that point, and it'd be interesting. Like, how much was that pressure on you? Like, all the changes, it's still happening, and then now I guess St. George is next. But how did you and I guess all 10 and the mayor like kind of get together trying to show, like, I know it's all coming down from the province, and of course this was the province 20 years ago when they planned this.
I'll push back a little bit on that. Not too hard, because the growth targets do come from other levels of government for sure, and changes that they make around things like if you fight something and it goes to a tribunal, the deck is often stacked against municipalities. To be fair, a lot of municipalities do not fight this sort of development. So when we do, they're shocked.
Oh, no. Oh, okay.
A lot of municipalities, think about the middle of Ontario. You want to build 200 houses?
Yeah.
Great, right? And a lot of that sort of mentality, especially in places that have a pretty strong, maybe conservative political bent, right? Like it's all development's good development. What are you talking about? And I do think Brant had a lot of that mentality when it was maybe undersized. The problem though is that there's only so many places you can grow, and there's only so much water, and there's only so much farmland, and there's only so much happening there. But the deck is really stacked towards development. A lot of the decisions that were made are made 20, 30 years ago. And, you can see that from a social progress point of view too. Like a lot of the homelessness and house issues that we're having now. I study this as a social worker and a social service work researcher. And I look and I go, wow, there are decisions that were made federally 35 years ago that are leading to this stuff. There's decisions that were made provincially 30 years ago that are leading to this stuff. And municipalities have tried to do what they can, and in some ways very successful, Brant and Brantford included, to deal with some of that as best they can. But the problems are, doubling and tripling in size at the same time growth is. So yes, there's a push there. Yes, the province is often mucking with things like development charges and the ratios and the rules around development. However, I did notice that on at least the term of council I was on, when we organized back and we pushed back, not always, but often developers would say, "Oh, this isn't really worth the hassle. Let's see what we can do," right? And we would get concessions. Even though they're likely to win, just statistically at the tribunals, that, however, they don't want to go there if they don't have to, right? And so, we had our moratorium. I know at the time we had a development project in Norfolk that had to stop halfway through because they realized they didn't have enough water capacity, right? So we use that as an example of like, look, even for these developers, if you don't want, half-built basements that are going to get rained on for 3 years because we have to stop development. But, there's a difference between some of the maybe Hamilton, Toronto developers and their sort of attitudes towards these communities and others. I will say, I think a lot of Toronto and Hamilton developers were actually pretty shocked by how much we pushed back. And we did get concessions and on a lot of the different developments and pauses and things like that. But again, the province can come in. What people don't understand is provinces are fully in control of municipalities. They could decide tomorrow that Brantford, Hamilton, Toronto is going to be called Mega City 1, and it'll be that way. Look what happened municipally in Toronto when Ford decided to change the boundaries for the wards. They were already passed. People had already registered, right, to run in certain wards. He cut them. And they can do that. We are completely, municipalities are completely at the ebb and flow of the provinces in many ways. So people will push back in the fight City Hall, but they won't vote the same way when it comes. They won't hold maybe provincial officials accountable in the same way, even though they're often they should be very accountable. Right? Not that municipal politicians and elected folks shouldn't be. But man, a lot of this stuff is provincial and federal, including things like affordable housing, including things like development. And your local council will hear a lot of it, and then people will continue to vote because they don't just vote on one issue, right? And people don't make that connection between the province or the feds and some of this policy.
Right. Yes. I need to post that photo again that I have that has the different levels of who looks after this, who looks after that. Definitely something that needs to be done.
And that municipalities can be overruled, right? Municipalities can and do get overruled in many different ways. And also something I noticed, at least during my term, is a lot of times the province would come out with a statement about how they were going a certain direction with something like paramedics. We were going to amalgamate paramedics and have these mega paramedic, and then they changed their mind, but we had made decisions based on them telling us X, and then they did Y. And in one way, I give them credit because changing your mind's not a bad thing. But in another, like any business person will tell you, that unpredictability when it comes to policy can really mess up your plans.
Right. Well, that's definitely true. I can see that. I guess let's go on. So let's just say, hypothetically, you're running again this year. What would you have?
Don't tell my wife. No, okay.
I won't. It'll just stay in
not even room. Hypothetically. Not even hypothetically. Don't tell her.
Won't. Not even hypothetically. Okay. The IT side of my brain going, well, you can make a website, you can do social media. That's essentially doing this. We could do this. We could have talks online. TikTok, I'm guessing trying to get to the younger crowd would be probably a good thing. I think I remember you had like an app that had where the signs were. Stuff like that. What would be in an IT side? It would be a toolkit. What would be great? I know we need to get the signs. You need to get your talking points, of course. I guess for the long list of new people, which is great. It's great to see that people are engaged and they're learning instead of just being behind a keyboard and complaining, saying everything's broken, but then don't try and learn. At least that's my thoughts. But so getting engaged, it's great. Get their point of view, get people's also point of views. But what would be your toolkit that you would use, or what a candidate should have to make their lives, I guess, easier? Maybe.
Yeah, or more effective. Maybe is the wording I'd use. But
that's it. I think doing my IT terms, trying to change it.
Yeah. I think everything changes every 8 years anyway. And congratulations to you for doing this for 8 years, right? I mean, but you've seen how it's changed, and you're using different tools and doing different things. I think if I was running, and anybody I've been consulting with, and again, unpaid, just consulting with people I think are good, I would say two things. I would say that everything's important, but you're going to have to prioritize some things. And what I would prioritize in this day and age is, you're going to have social media presence, and you're going to have a website, and you're going to have a place where people can donate and people can request a sign and all that stuff. I would think two things are actually most important. Three, really. But so I'm still a big believer in door knocking, but I understand it's changed. Right. I understand that people are less likely to knock on doors. Communities are bigger. I still think you do it. I still think it's important. I still think you need to go and like a door-to-door salesperson, you got to get yelled at, and you got to get told off, and you got to get somebody to say, hey, look at what's happened with my sidewalk here for 30 years. And like, you need to hear that stuff. Right. I think that's important. Yeah. I think there are people who are home, and a lot of folks who vote are folks who are seniors and are home. However, I think a lot of people don't answer the phones and don't answer the doors. And also, I think people are kind of sick of social media. So I would say that the other piece is text, getting people's cell phone numbers to have some sort of texting ability with them, because people do check their texts more than they do their emails, more than they do their websites, better in terms of like quality evaluation than they do on social media. And it's things like, hey, have you voted? Especially in the online period, and then the day of in-person voting. You can't overdo it, but you don't want to underdo it. And to me, that is a really valuable resource. And then the last thing, I think people, especially in a post-COVID world, are dying for community again. So I think you have to do the small to medium-sized local events. I was at Mandy Samwell's launch, for lack of a better term, yesterday, and there was, well over 100 people. I'd say closer to 200, and the feeling was really nice. And people from a lot of different political perspectives and communities in Brantford, and people who just like Mandy were there, and you started with a good feeling and you left with a good feeling. And I think people want to feel that again, right? And I think that's important. And I think you have to there is a retail part. I always say this to my students when we talk about social work too, and social service work and concurrent disorders is, there's a retail aspect to this too. It matters when a client calls you, how you answer the phone. It matters when somebody comes in, how you greet them. And I think people want to see that you're a genuine human being who has something to say, but can also listen and can be in the throng. And I think, especially in Brant, you'd be surprised. Like, yeah, we might do some open houses where nobody shows up, or very few people do. But then you'd also have these public meetings where 400 people would show up. And you have to be able to handle that too. Yeah. And I think that's an important skill. And I think you can't be afraid of that. And that doesn't mean you don't sometimes have anxiety about it, or sometimes it goes off the rails or whatever it might be. But I think it's so vital that people still have a bit of the public square. So I think it's that, you got to do all the things a little bit, but the three things I would really focus on are the small in-person opportunities for people to really genuinely connect authentically. The tech stuff for the shorter sort of reminders. And I can't remember the first thing I said, but whatever that first thing I said was too.
Actually, texting was your first one on social media, which is that's one thing I didn't think of.
The texting?
Because I guess the next thing is, do you have your regular cell phone, or do you have a service so that if you don't win, you can just cut it off?
I think the service makes sense. Not even if you don't win, but this is something I pushed for on council and I lost. It was one of the first things I pushed for that didn't go through. Is I don't know why councillors don't have a council phone. And I don't know if they do now. I don't think they do, but I was sitting there, and again, I'm in a different position. I'm like, my kids might be watching Paw Patrol on my phone. I don't want a constituent texting me saying, "You're the biggest effing jerk I ever met in my life." And, look what my neighbor did, and send a picture or something, right? And I had people show up at my house, and I'm not the only
driving in the car.
Yep, I had people show up at my house, and I'm not the only counselor that did, because you don't have like an office, right? And sometimes they're not in a good mood, and sometimes they are in a good mood, but still it's your house, uninvited and unannounced, right? And so I used to do office hours as I'd book a room at the council chambers for 2 hours and try to get people to meet me there, and I do that regularly. But again, I would look at those things. My wife is a private social worker, does counseling. She has like a Google app that she can use to make incoming. It's like a virtual phone, virtual messaging that isn't her personal one. That's for work. Yeah. And 8 years ago, those weren't as accessible, and I did look into them. Right. So it kind of became not as helpful, or they were only Google phones. That service was only in the States, and there was a lot there. I think that's actually a good idea, just to separate some of that, because when your family, friends, kids want to get a hold of you, you want to make sure they can get a hold of you. And your constituents, you do too, but you have to prioritize that, right? You have to prioritize that in terms of even the amount of workflow that comes in. And by the way, it's different for different counselors. Some are just naturally more called upon, and some are less called upon. And often, and especially with the Brant piece, funny story. Steve Howes and I once got calls from a person in Ward 2 who had a drug dealer that they wanted us to go, I guess, be vigilantes about. I don't know what we're going to do. But me and Steve are looking and we're looking and we're looking into it. And it was a street name that there's one in Paris and there's one in Brantford. And it was a Ward 2 Brantford constituent who was calling Steve and I because she was convinced like we were her counselors. And we spent like an afternoon trying to figure out what to do until we realized, wait, that we drove by the house, and that's what happened. Is eventually I think Steve drove by the house and said, it's not there. It cuts off like 20 houses, 20 address numbers beforehand, and we had to call them back and say, actually, you're going to have to call your Ward 2 councillor in Brantford. So again, even things like
or
that,
the
like
police, one of the two.
Yeah, or the police or whomever. But yeah, I think that's helpful for you actually can then focus on the work part of things more sort of diligently when you're focused on it, because doing all the stuff off the side of your desk is not ideal, right? I really believe in like, okay, this is the time to do this and this, and unless it's an emergency, a lot of things can wait. And you also have 2 councillors, so that's a benefit because they might have different availability.
Yeah, well, especially when everybody, well, not everybody, but most of the people have full-time jobs still, since it's not a full-time position. So those hours can fluctuate depending on the job position.
And I think you want people of all different stages and ages. And, I think it was really helpful for me to be a person with young children on council and bring that perspective. I think it's really helpful for Lucas Oakley to be an even younger person, to bring some of those 20-something concerns to the table, which often get kind of gate kept out of these rooms.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to have seniors, and I think it's important to have farmers, and I think it's important to have professionals, and I think it's important to have retired folks, and but the more diverse it is, the better, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like, especially when you're looking at development. When you're looking at development, you're planning. I've been going to the St. George ones, and they're planning on its 2030, 2040, 2050. I'm like, well, it's the 20-somethings and even younger that is really going to benefit from this, like the new school, maybe, and the parks and that stuff. Of course, it's all stuff we might want now, but it's not SimCity. It doesn't take 5 seconds to build it, even though I played that a lot as a kid.
I like to use ActRaiser as my example of city building video games.
Yeah. All right. What other questions I have here? I was looking for. Well, I got one question that was out for, and it might be great for your social side. Is the engagement and getting the voter turnout? Looking at the last 3 elections for municipals, it keeps going down, and I have
a unique perspective on this. You're not going to hear this somewhere else. Yeah, because everybody always gives the same answer. I'm not going to give you the same answer. I cut you off. There's a little lag there. That's my fault. Should I go or should I wait? I'm sorry.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. There's a bit of a lag, and I realized I cut you off. I think voter turnout is down when it's not an interesting mayoral race. So I live in Norfolk, right? And in Norfolk, last election and this election, very interesting mayoral races. Lots of different viable candidates. And I'm not trying to, make a slander at anybody, but in the last municipal election in Brant, there wasn't, it was pretty obvious. There wasn't really a viable second, third, fourth candidate. The one before that, it was up. Well, you had Mayor Bailey, and you had Ron Eddy and Mayor Ron,
David.
And you had Don, who was a former councillor, and it was an interesting race. Plus, you had a bunch of interesting municipal races, like ward races, and voting was up, right? And I think the mayoral race actually is what draws out. When you had Chris Friel and Kevin Davis in a dogfight, it goes up, right? Same thing you see in local areas. Like, you see, a lower rate federally and provincially than sometimes in the past, for sure. And there's lots of systemic reasons that I don't want to bore everybody about there. But when there's like a really exciting race, I'm in Norfolk, and Bobby Ann Brady is an interesting person, and Mary Amy is an interesting person, and they were running, and voting overall went up compared to other regions. So I've been in an election where, it was like me, Phil, and Lloyd St. Amand, and voting went up, and it was higher locally than it was across the country, right? When you look at pure average, when a Charlie Angus runs, when the interesting people run, voting goes up, right? So I think the mayoral races in both Brantford and Brant, I think they're going to split a lot of votes because there are many viable candidates in both regions. And so you might end up having like a mayor in Brantford who wins on like 3,000 votes or 2,000 votes because there's so many viable candidates, and I have my preferred candidates, and so do other people, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. And I think the Brant race is also going to be really interesting because you have, a current councillor, a former councillor, and you have more people coming, right? On the mayoral side, this is going to be a big week. I think I hear rumors of 3 other people. And I think there's a lot of viability. Oh yeah. See, I got it's just rumors, but, and you never know. Just people rumors. Sometimes
there's a lot of signatures.
Yeah. Well, people have been getting them, but they could go to a ward race too, right? But the point is that I think that drives interest in overall voting, and people really feel strongly in either direction. People can feel negatively about a candidate or positively about a candidate or both. It drives people to the polls, and then you see more folks voting in the wards because they're voting anyway.
Right. Yeah. No,
so different answer than you were expecting, I bet.
Yeah. That's true. Oh, I went to Dairy Queen for Miracle Treat Day yesterday, and ran into David and Christine, who were there getting Dairy Queen and that stuff, and I asked them, like, so how has engagement has been for her? Because of course I can see the social media and that stuff. She's like, people are more engaged this year. I'm like, that's great. That's the goal of every election. So. And it's great to hear that on that side.
You have interesting candidates, right, in both the city and the county, and that's going to drive interest.
Right. That is for sure. Going off of the Ward 5 by-election that we just had, it seems a while ago, but back in last November, which was the first one that was all online, which... For me, it's a tech side. That was benefit. That was like, hey, it's the first time you can vote. You can just sit on the couch and vote. You don't have to leave. But then I found out from Ella and some others that it's like, it's great if that's your style, but for a lot, it was a social event to go and wait in these long lines and vote in with a piece of paper. So it's interesting how this time we'll at least have both, where last time it was just the Cairnsville, which was for Ward 5 being so big. It was kind of in a good spot, but also maybe needed another location. So I'm guessing we will have more of those. I think those locations are coming up, but it'll be interesting to see. What are your thoughts of the online?
Sure. I think it's great, but it's this is going to be a weird analogy, but have you been following, you've mentioned video games, you've been following PlayStation's decision to cut physical media? And I kind of come down in the same vein on this, which is I think more options are great. I never want to see less options, right? So I hate the idea of only being able to vote online. I also don't love the idea of only being able to vote in person. I think there are some issues with early voting, but I'm glad it's there. I think the good news is the longer people are doing online voting, where there's that online voting window, the more they understand. Because I still think that there's an issue in places like Brantford and Brant where it's like people don't understand they have 2 votes for ward council. And educating folks on that, I think, is a benefit. I think candidates would benefit from that. I think it actually helps the tenor of, you run for mayor and you have opponents. There's only one choice. I know when I ran for council, I love being able to say, whoever you send me with, like, I know who I'm voting for my other vote, but whoever you send me to work with, I can work with. Right. And if you're sending this person, maybe you want somebody like me. And if you're, as opposed to send me, not them. Right. And vote for me, not them. Right. Like, I think it actually increases people's, the desirability of somebody who can be collaborative. And I still think there's a lot of that in mayoral ones too, because the mayor is just one vote, even with strong mayor powers. Right. And there's a lot of, if you're not good at managing a team and listening to people across the spectrum, I think you will do less well than if you are. But I think it's great. I never want to see less options. I want to see more. I think for people like you and I who are here, I'll still choose mostly to vote in person. I love voting at my work. I love voting like federally and provincially when that's been an option. I voted mail before through the mail when I was in university, and my friend who's a ward councillor now, Brian Van Tilburg, was running. I wanted to vote for him really badly, so I made sure that I did the mailing vote. I think I voted once online, or have I? I don't know if I have. I actually don't think I have. I'm having a bit of an
I did last something.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear, but I also love taking my kids to go vote. I bring my kids because of that social piece. Like I find other adults love seeing kids in the line, and they love that whole thing. And you know, and I didn't just send them to vote when I was able to have me on the ballot either, right? Like I love just I love that whole vibe, right? So so to me, I'm a person who I'm totally capable of online voting, but I want to vote in person. But I love that there is options, because options mean a lot of things. Claudine here is asking, will online voting increase votes? I don't think so. I think, again, other things.
I was wondering if you actually see that.
Yeah, other things can increase votes, like, you know, a compelling issue, compelling candidates, like plural, compelling races. I think those increase votes more than just the opportunity, because there's barriers with online voting. There's barriers with in person. Sometimes people just forget. You know, they mean to, and the date passes them by. People are very busy. Jack Layton, I spent a lot of time with Jack Layton, and I always remember a line he used to say, and it was that people think about voting less often than they think about their taxes, because you have to do your taxes every year, and you don't have to vote every year, right? And like in terms of doing your taxes, right? Not in terms of like what your tax rate is. And I always thought that was interesting. And it's like, yeah, people, if you're a football fan, you think more about your favorite team than you do about voting. Right? Because you don't have to do it very often. And I think about work, right? Like when I'm at work and there's a certain form I have to do, but I only have to do it like once a semester, you know, once a year, you know, I have to remember how to do it. And we don't have regular every 6 months we're having elections. People get out of practice too. And when we have, I will say this though, you talked about development and new folks to communities. I'll just say that in the 3 elections I've run in, that anybody who's come from a country where they were not allowed to vote, where they were oppressed from voting, I've never met a person who's come from a country like that who has not been excited to vote here, right? And I think sometimes we take it for granted. I think there's a conscientious objection to voting sometimes, and I understand that, especially for like local Indigenous communities who don't see that as their government. I totally get that, and I think that's a thoughtful choice. But it's the unthoughtful choices that so many of us take voting for granted, because like we've always had the option, right? And
it's true.
I think it's important, but we'll see. I also think young people, getting them to vote, I wish the voting age was 16, because more people would do it in high school like they do for student council. You know, my little joke is that I got more votes for student council president when I was in high school at Assumption than I did when I won an election in Ward 2, right? Because everybody votes. And if you had 16 as the age, and I think 16-year-olds are proficient enough and smart enough to vote. I know some 45-year-olds who shouldn't vote because they're not smart enough on the issues, but they're allowed to. But if you had 16-year-olds, if you had them voting in like after civics class, I think that would be a lifelong thing. The problem is often voting starts at 18, and really your first election might be 19 or 20, and you're already out of school. You're already out of like that natural polling place that you know, and you don't have that sort of. Often you're at a school out of town, and like my first vote for Brian Mantilborg, I had to really research how to get to vote for him because of the timing, right? And how many people during reading week or exam week were that interested in doing the same thing? None, right? Or very few. So
no, that's true. I've been trying to think of like how could you have paper and also online, but then we get into the conspiracy that you're double voting,
right?
So like that would be interesting, because of course the paper is supposed to be anonymous. But you would have to be able to like look up if the person's already voted and then say, no, go home.
which there's ID and there's ways to do it. There's voter lists, and that's what we do, right? Like, we don't, not a conspiracy show. Brave Votes is a show about facts and opinions, not a conspiracy.
Let me change this photo. Get that other photo that we had that I played around with, blowing out background. I didn't think we'd talk anything like that. No. But it should be. We're going to be interesting race, it seems. It's guaranteed we're not going to have anybody that's just going to walk in that was already there. So that's going to have a lot of talking points, and we'll have to definitely I guess, advertise events. Yeah. So
Mhm.
that's, I guess, one thing on my to-do list is to make sure we have a calendar of events, and at least for the candidates to try and have them all in one spot, and hopefully they're not on the same night.
Yeah, and I
So,
think
and maybe
for pages like yours, I think they're so valuable, and I've really enjoyed. I've always tried to like and comment when I can, and I think they're really valuable. But I don't think any single source should be any voter's one and only thing, right? Like
right.
people will say, like, how much do you need to know to vote? Like, a lot of people kind of use ignorance. It's like, I don't know what's going on, and I'd say watch one debate, and you'll know enough to
Right.
kind of at least get a feel of the person, a feel of their policies.
Yep.
If you go to a site like yours, I think that's great. But then also go to the candidate sites, and the candidates in Brant both have websites. They both have social media channels. They both have get a feel for them, get a feel for their policies. And I think like that's enough, right? You read 10 articles. Well, they might all have, and I'm not talking about you, but like news, they might miss things, they might get things, but I think that's good to know what's going on in the big picture and what people's reactions to issues. But try to watch one debate. I know ward candidates often don't have one. Try to go to a community meeting or two, right? Not everybody is able to go. Look, there's 5 candidates for mayor. I'm going to go to one of their events each. Then I'm going to watch debate. Then I'm also going to, research them in depth. And so let's try to find a thing we can do, right? And that gives you a bit of a snapshot in the moment, right? And I think that can be really helpful.
For sure. Like that's what I was saying. I'm trying to put as much information, but I'm not sitting in front of a computer staring at all of these other posts at the same time. So I can have AI do it for me. Maybe, but no.
Well, and AI will miss stuff, right? Like, so we looked
exactly.
at, like my bio, and it's like, oh, it's kind of wrong and kind of right, or it's going to miss things entirely. And we have candidates, all wards, both city and county, mayoral and the wards that have interesting resumes, are interesting people. We have a ton of communicative candidates in the wards, and it's not kind of like it used to be where it's like, well, we knew this guy from a long time and he's got 60% of the senior vote and he's going to those events on the weekend, and that's all you're going to hear from the. So many folks are very communicative, have platforms, have detailed sort of posts about positions, and I think that's the benefit of the social media. But by the same token, if I'm a candidate, I'm not just relying on that. It's like, again, you have to do all the things, but what do you prioritize on the top of that pyramid as like the most effective things versus things, you should do, but I wouldn't. I think it's not great when candidates are just social media candidates. I don't think that really helps either, right? And luckily, I think more candidates are doing all the things to some degree. But there are candidates who don't have to door knock. Some just leave lit. Some just say, hey, this is my phone number, give me a call, and that can work. Other times people are acclaimed. I have a family member who got acclaimed in an election last year. It's like, it's a totally different vibe than like I grinded for 15 years and I was so happy to win, and so it's like, and we had people who have fought elections who get acclaimed. It doesn't look like it's acclamation county or acclamation city this year though, so that's good.
Right. Yeah. No, that's for sure. Yeah, I guess back in the day it would have been, you could just show up, you put out like no social media, you could just show up, and then they would only run into you if you're walking around town.
Or you door knocked.
Yeah.
Right?
I can see how. Yeah, I can see how just doing a social media would be gotta be present there, and like you said, at the welcoming kind of introduction back in how long ago? That was May. That was May, wasn't it? I feel like so long ago. It's a lot of time, but as like you said before, it's a lot of time at the beginning, and then you get used to it. And I've heard that from current counselors as well. That is like, the first year was tough, and now you get to learn it and that stuff. I'm like, and hearing how many pages there are, I'm like, I don't even read a book this big unless it's about a little blue truck or something like that for my kids. So reading 400 pages for a meeting.
I have enjoyed reading for pleasure again, because I took a 4-year break from reading for pleasure, right? How there's also risks to social media, right? And people can get overexposed. people can get. Sometimes people, maybe they aren't their best selves on social media, right? Including candidates. Like, you meet some people in person, and I'm sure this has happened to you, where you're like, wow, that person was so nice, and online they're gruff and they're rude and they're abrasive and and then in person they're sweet and funny and personable. And so sometimes I think that's the thing too. Or sometimes people just they aren't comfortable with the mediums, the video, the short form, and that can be tough too. And also, what really engages people on social media in the last, I'd say, 7 years is rage bait, rage farming. But that can also, there's a lot of people who will watch that stuff and read that stuff and go, that's not for me, right?
It just came out with Facebook that they're getting money. They get more money off of scam ads, and they know it. They will charge more for a scam ad than it is for regular ads. So Facebook knows. But
even when you're inciting kind of like when you're inciting a lot of it's easy to sloganeer and things like that. But some people will watch that and they won't. A lot of people might engage, but there are a lot of people who they're not hitting like and they're not hitting angry and they're turning off of either politics, community, or the candidate. So there's Derek Blackburn, who's an NDP MP from Brant, used to tell me, the best advice he would give is about just no pat answers, right? You can't over explain things, but you also just going, it's fine, it'll work out. Or, the thing we have to do is throw the book at them. Well, what does that mean? Like, how much will that cost? And, if we just do this, and X, Y, and Z are going to be totally better. It's like, that's not the case. And people should hear the truth about these systems and how they work. And I do see we have another comment here.
John, talking about longtime candidates.
Good call.
Talking about the strong mayor powers.
Well, I think that's something to keep in mind, right? If people are, maybe the term is mercutial, or if they feel kind of like what's the term? Like, I think we have a lot of this in the States, the sort of strongman types who get elected to offices of power. I think one might want to be careful about that. Strong mayor powers are interesting. A lot of people say they won't use them, but then they might. We don't know. I think we have to look at it as something that if somebody's in the seat, they can change their mind, even if they say they're not going to use them. And you have to ask yourself, are you comfortable with this person having those powers? I don't think they should exist. I think it was a bad policy that, again, tends to be favorable towards provincial government officials and towards developers. Again, Paris specifically is kind of interesting, right? People want it to be Toronto and Tillsonburg at the same time. And I don't know how possible that is. I don't think it is. And I think strong mayor powers help it be more like Toronto and less like Tillsonburg.
Well, isn't that what the strong mayor's powers was for? Was, hey, my developer friends need easier to build houses, and we need this.
That's an argument.
Build houses.
I'll also say that the idea that they can set a budget sort of changes the budgeting process, and I think the budget process is the most important process council does, and it puts a lot of power into the hands of a person and their staff, as opposed to everyone who's elected a seat at the table, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's there. I clicked on the different button.
That's right.
There we go. Getting used to this. It'll be good for maybe John again. I don't know. John, what do you think about this? Get you and the other Ward 3s up here. Just a quick intro and see what everybody has. Other than that, I think most of my questions are done. Like, it's construction wise, we talked about that. Transport, social. It's brought up the transportation, because I know the whole relationship between Brant and Brantford are kind of on the rocks and not the nice whiskey kind right now. But yeah, it's one thing that's come back. Well, they talked about amalgamation, of course. I think that's probably been a thing on forever. But I guess like things like the bus would, I don't know, like. You brought in the Brant. It was while you were in the Brant.
My first real vote. Brant Transit, right?
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, my first time going to City Hall in Brantford was to get a bus to go to Assumption, right? I'll just be really frank. This was a huge priority of mine, the Brant Transit, but I saw it as the best idea would be to partner with the city and have them run routes and or at least a Paris route. And it looked like the city was open to that. And because of, I would say, partly personalities, but also, the city of Brantford, I don't think was in the most, in my term, the most open-armed they've ever been when it comes to the county. More like sometimes a closed fist and sometimes an open arm. Though a lot of collaboration happened. But Mayor Davis at the time was straight up like, "Hey, we're not going to do this because we didn't like how," I can't remember what it was. And they were open to it, and then they weren't, and then COVID happened. Right. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I think, and this is the funny thing, is the county was willing to just pay the cost, right? Like, it shouldn't cost the city any more than it, or at least in talks we were talking about, how we envisioned it was, you tell us what the cost is, and then that's what we could vote on. And, there wouldn't be more cost to the city. In fact, they could, make a little bit, but the economic development piece of people being able to travel between both, and then things you hear about, like, again, I was paramedic services chair for 4 years, and, you'll hear about people calling an ambulance back in the day to Brant to get to the hospital, and they say, "Oh, you know what? I think I'm fine," and then they go to the casino, right? Like, and that costs the taxpayer a ton of money versus an actual system where they could just do that. Or you have this go bus, but it only goes to Brantford, and how do you get to Brantford? And you can't park. I remember my wife and I were looking at going to a concert, and we had to get my mother-in-law to drive us to the go bus because, you can't really park a lot of places overnight in Brantford. That makes sense. Like, you can, but the risk is that you'll get towed. Right. And you may not want to either for various reasons. And there wasn't a full public way to get there. There's not a full public way to get to the Via station. There's not and there is now, but I think I think a loop is very, very helpful. And if you had, 2 loops that sort of went back and forth on the same route, one for one end of Brant, one for the other, that, met in downtown Brantford or Lillian Park Mall or somewhere like that, I think that's a win-win for both communities. And again, the county should pay for it, but it would benefit both communities, because you have a lot of folks, like the people who live in Brantford and Brant, they don't see the boundaries the same way we do, right? They see it in terms of who they are electing and who they're governing, but like if my best friend lives in Brantford, that's just my best friend who lives not that far away from me, right? It's not, or Waterford, or Norfolk, or wherever, like, or Hamilton even. It's like, we want access to that. It would help a lot of young folks too, especially because cars, insurance, and gas are so expensive. I think we need to enhance the public transit options.
Yeah, those for sure.
But Brantford needs to come to the table, and Brant needs to come to the table to do it together. And I'm actually very hopeful that next term we'll see more and maybe better collaboration. I hear a lot of candidates in Brantford for ward and for the city. Again, I was at Mandy's thing yesterday, and a big part of it was about we need to work with the county and Six Nations and credit, and people were like smiling at people, and when they were saying in Brantford about charging Brant consumers more to use the Wayne Gretzky Center, people in Brantford are like, "Why would you do that? That's my uncle, that's my cousin, that's my friend, that's my neighbor." And I don't want them charging us to use their sportsplex more than they charge their people. And, it's like, right, exactly. So again, I am actually pretty hopeful, because I'm hearing it from the Brantford side, which, tends to have more power and more population in these things. I'm hearing it from so many viable candidates. And it's a big talking point about wanting to work better with the county. And the county folks have been saying that for a long time. And, again, I have my biases there, but I'm a person who chaired the social services committee that was joint, chaired paramedic services that was joint. I think sometimes I was the Brant interpreter to both sides. It almost, you had a question in there about like personal toll. The worst part about my time on council was, trying to deal with the personalities and the peccadillos of Brantford and Brant staff, elected folks. Sometimes I felt like the translator, mediator, social worker for both communities, and that was just my perspective. Lots of people were trying to do that work, but I felt sometimes I was over relied on because I kind of spoke Brantford and I kind of spoke Brant. And at one point I had to say, I can't do this to the same degree I've been doing it in terms of like mediating and the back channel stuff and the sit in the room with people from both and the conflict. And I think people are done with that. And
That's good.
Both sides made mistakes in that way, and both sides have things you should pat them on the back and hug them for, and both sides have things you should be upset with them for, and both of them made unforced errors. But I think that's turning a corner. I'm really hopeful.
That's good. Okay. Well, we talked for an hour, and I have a feeling we could probably talk longer.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm out of questions. Is there anything else any tips or anything else that you can think of for, I guess, the candidates running and for us to pay attention to, and maybe I should pay attention to
sure,
a little bit more?
I think people are looking for sort of a less abrasive politics. I think we've seen that in the US. I think we've seen it here in Canada at times too. I think it's running out of favor with folks. So I think that's something, you can be assertive. In social work, we talk a lot about assertiveness, right? When, just yelling and screaming isn't really effective, and being meek and walked all over isn't really effective. So how do we become more assertive? And I think societally, we need to elect folks who are assertive, who are open to listening, but also, can push back on things. Nobody's going to do it perfectly. The voter's never wrong. They might change their mind though. But that's how the votes go, or how the votes go. People are working really hard on, all different wards and all different positions and all different elected offices for folks' votes. I think you have lots of viable opportunities to hear them out. For candidates, it's tough. And that first year is really tough. And, I was saying the other day that I felt like I was a pretty good dad and a pretty good counselor. But I think I was only both of those things because my kids were a certain age. My wife wasn't as busy as she is now, and COVID happened, and I was home a lot more for it. Plus work, right? In addition to that, I don't think I could be as good a dad and as good a counselor now. And I think the tenor of the sort of public has changed too. So I would just say that it's hard. I think it's in some ways going to get easier, in some ways going to get harder. Don't be afraid to go to therapy. Don't be afraid to have a couple of folks that you chat with, and stay connected to people outside of your political work if you are elected, right? That, I had a buddy whose house I go to sometimes after council meetings, who lived down the street, have a beer, chat a little bit, touch grass, right? Like in a way, but keep those social connections outside, because the job is as busy as you want it to be, and sometimes it'd be 80 hours, and sometimes it'd be 15 a week. And I think if it's too little of your life, that's not good. It's not respecting the office, and if it's too much, it's also not good, and you're going to burn out. So, just keep those social and family and outside of politics connections. And the same thing even during the campaign, right? Like, go get your haircut, go get a massage, go read something for pleasure. If not, it'll consume. It can consume you, and by the same token, it's funny. I pop out in the world, and I'm less available than I was, but people are generally nice in a way that they weren't always during my time in office, right? So, and again, it's not their responsibility to be nice, but I think people have to kind of come at it with some philosophy about, what's effective, right? What's effective for the position, for yourself, and for your community. So
apparently 4:00 is the best time to start this.
Now
There's Lucas. Hi.
Hey, Lucas.
Because we had 5 people online watching, so I know, of course, it's going to be recording if people are that stuff. So it'll be interesting. But thank you for your time. That was
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time, for all the stuff you do with Brand Votes. I think it's a good resource for the community.
It's fun. I like learning, so that's why
that's what's in it for you.
So, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All
Thanks,
right.
John.
I guess we'll leave it at that. And thank you for your time. And I'll talk to you later. Yeah.
Thanks.